In previous videos, we have already seen how we can bind individual properties to properties of a control. Now, let's analyze how we can bind a data collection to a data collection type control. To perform this test, I will proceed to stop the execution of the application and I will proceed to create a new page. To do this, in the folder called Views, I'm going to create a new element. I indicate that I want to create a content page and we're going to call it, for example, People View. I had previously talked about a control called Collection View, so that's the control that I'm going to use as part of the content page. I remove the stack layout and in its place I paste the same code that we had already seen previously. As part of this example, what we did was to create a data source and we created an array of strings that were a set of strings that are static. We're going to proceed to run the application, but first we need to assign this page as the initial page. I start the execution of the application, and now we can see it in action to remember a little bit how this control looked like. Now, regularly, when we work with a collection, we're going to want to display dynamic information, not static, as we are doing at the moment. So, we need to learn how to connect data collection controls to list of information. How are we going to do this? Well, we're going to proceed to create the corresponding view model for this page that is in the folder called View Models. I'm going to proceed to create a new class and we're going to call it People View Model. Remember the nomenclature that I mentioned before. Once we have created this class, we're going to convert it into a public class and we're going to proceed to declare a property that is a list of strings called people. Let's create its get and its set, and let's proceed to also create the corresponding constructor for this class. As part of the list of people, I'm going to proceed to initialize this list and I'm going to add a set of different names to this list. Remember also that it is necessary to indicate which is going to be the binding context of the page. In this case, the binding context has to be set in the file peopleview.xaml.cs. Let's indicate binding context is equal to a new instance of peopleViewModel. We have to import the namespace that is needed, and we're going to start the execution of the application to see how the application is going to look like. Once the application has been initialized, we have here a set of values that we have statically set. Let's proceed to bind the collection to this dataset that we have already declared to be part of the view model. How do we do this? Well, let's go back to the file called peopleview.xaml. We're going to proceed to remove this property called item source, which is currently part of the collection view. If we save the changes, we see how automatically all the content disappears, and what we're going to do is to replace the item source by the list that we already created in the view model. To do this, we have to specify item source again, but in the way I am currently doing in the XAML code, and we have to indicate through a binding which is going to be the data collection that we want to use to obtain the information. Remember that in our case, the list is called people. It is this list that is part of the view model that we can see here. It is a public property. Once we do this, let's save the changes. And look how in the application are already appearing each of the elements that we are getting already from this list of strings. Now in this specific case, we are working with a list of strings and it is each one of these strings that we are binding with this dot to the labels control. What would happen if we had more complex data types, such as more elaborate classes? Well, let's make an example of this style. We're going to proceed to return to our view model. It is this one that we see here, and instead of a list of strings, we're going to indicate that we want a list of people. I'm going to import the namespace that is needed. It has to be this one that appears as part of the project. We must also initialize this list so that we do not have any problem of references. And once I've done that, I'm going to replace the constructor with a constructor that I've previously created, which is a little bit more elaborate. Because I'm basically creating the set of people that I'm adding to the listing, and I'm populating the information for each of these people with data. With this new information, if I proceed to test the application one more time, we can see that we are indeed being shown the information as part of the listing. However, each one of the elements is showing us the full name of the model as such. That is happening because we are creating a binding directly to each element of the list. We do this through the dot we are setting here. Remember that the dot indicates that we want to take each element that is part of the list. And since each list item is the type person, so it is showing us all the complete definition of each model. What we must do to change this behavior is to indicate of that reference that we are obtaining which is the specific property that we want to bind. In this case, for example, we can try with the property called name. Let's save the changes, and we can see here each of the people that are being created as part of the listing. Here, there is no need to place a person data type before the name because we are directly binding the collection view to the list of people that contains a reference to a person, and therefore we can directly access each of the properties of that person.